Yeah, so I've been researching into the velocity-based training, and I've been in strength programming for a while, but I've never got into an actual velocity-based velocity using program before, and it was pretty interesting. So the base idea is using the velocity to regulate your athlete's overall daily readiness, and you can also regulate their loads. So if you were to have, let's say, strength program that is programmed 80% 5 by 5, and you start with to find the daily readiness assessment, which is going to be at your, because you're doing 80% by 5 by 5, you're going to hit one rep at 80%. Look at the velocity of that 80% and compare it to average velocity of 80%. And to see if it's 10% lower than your average, that means that your athletes is not having a good day. Or the velocity is faster, like 10% faster, that tells you that the athlete's having a better day or a good day. Now, after getting the 80% velocity for one rep, you times that by 0.8. That's going to be your range. So you times it by 0.8 because it's called the 20% velocity threshold. And there's a study, if the bar speed exceeds that 20% velocity threshold, that means the bar is significantly slowing down and you're just kind of grinding through that intensity. So you always want to stay within that range for your athlete to feel better on the next day. So what you're doing, yeah. hmm
Philosophy training is based on.
Yeah, back squat, one rep max.
So is that 20% range? Is that a plus 10 and minus 10 over that average speed, or is it minus 20 or
So yeah,
plus
it's
20?
it's minus so it's minus 20. So
Yeah.
if you were to, so there's two different approach. To get that 20% velocity threshold, you multiply the velocity times 0.8, then you'll get that number. Or else you times it by 0.2 and subtract that velocity to what you got from when you multiply it by 0.2, then that will be the same as those two methods. So you're getting that 20% velocity threshold in two different ways, but just multiplying by 0.8 is just easier way. They'll get the same numbers, but it's multiplying by 0.8 is basically doing subtracting by 20% and getting that velocity threshold.
Is the feedback mechanism from the equipment, is that automatic? So you
Yes, it's very fast.
yeah.
Everyone's gonna have their individual app, and you can just set that velocity threshold to 20%, 25, 30%. I'm aiming to do 20% at max, because there's a study, if you when compared to 20% threshold versus the 40% threshold, 20% threshold had a better result in absolute strength progression.
And that's what we're training, right? Specifically for this, because I know in
Yeah,
philosophy of training, there's certain equations you can use for
mhm.
different strength types, correct?
Yeah. And there's this like very straightforward ways to look at the absolute strength speed range. If you just go into Google and just type in velocity based training, you'll be able to see velocity zones. So we'll be staying at least no more than 0.5 meters per second because that is the absolute strength range. If you want to go up higher on the intensity, you probably want to stay around 0.24 uh 0.24 plus or minus 6.6 zero point 0.6, because there was a study when athletes were measuring their one rep max back squat velocity. That was the average range of velocity. They all stayed at 0.2 0 point no 2.4 plus or minus 0.6. So that would be like I would expect to be like 85% to 95% to 100% range. And above that would be like 70 80, yeah, something like that.
So if you're using this equipment and your velocity is low for the day,
Mhm.
kind of RPE style, how's that dictating your loading?
Oh, so you'll be doing, let's say, 80%. You do a daily assessment, and you have a slower 80%. Now your velocity is slower than the average. Then you would just get that velocity, times that by 20% threshold, and that velocity and the velocity threshold range, you'll just stay in that range for the whole. So we're using ret 6. They have 4 to 8 sets at 80% for triples, and so you'll be staying in that range. If an athlete is not able to stay in that range, we'll regulate the load for them to, so they can stay within that range.
Are you plugging in your loading to this app?
Yes,
Will
yes,
it spit
I
out
will be.
the loading for the day? That's great. So what do you? We're gonna use this velocity based training as one sample. What are the other samples? What are we comparing it against?
So I'm comparing a scientifically proven ret 6 program for one participant. So that would be a traditional strength programming, and we'll have two people, Emmett and Sam, doing the ret 6 using the velocity auto regulation method. So that would be a velocity based training versus the traditional strength programming. And then I will be doing a different method where, so this uses a velocity also, but the percentage range is not based on one rep mag percentage, like 80%, but I will be recording the eight, so I'll be doing 80% for one rep and get that velocity, and that will be 80% velocity. So I'll be using that velocity specifically to hit that 80% intensity. So I'm using the velocity rather than intensity to put into my program. So it's a different approach. I'm expecting, I mean, this is what I came up with. Like, this is my own kind of research, but I think it would have a successful outcome using this method.
Is that challenging?
It's not
Trying
challenging. It's not.
to
It's
hit the same
very
velocity.
simple. Yeah.
So
With
you got three
you
study
said you were going to
groups.
take 80%.
I think
Do
we got.
your
Go ahead, Sam.
You said you were going to take 80% load for your 100 max and then do the speed off of that and then use
Yeah.
that
Get the
for
speed off of
velocity.
that, and yeah.
Would it not make more sense to use the device, find your speed at your 1 rep max, and then use that speed to find that sort of 80% speed, because then it's all based off velocity? Instead, if you do the 80% load and then find your speed for that load, that would, in sort of principle, be off the percentage still, right?
Yeah, it would be off the percentage. So, like, great thing about velocity based training, even if you have 80% velocity at, let's say, 2.4 on average, but on the different day, your 80% velocity would be different than 2.4, but you can still regulate your the fatigue management using the velocity, because velocity will change daily. And if you compare that to an average, yeah, you'll always have different velocity, but you'll stay within that 80% velocity range for the day. So your load for 80% velocity will always change. It would be lower, it can be lower, it can be higher, but based off of that velocity, we're using that as an intensity.
Okay.
Why'd you pick the back squat for this?
Back squat was assigned by Rob. I'm pretty sure.
Just for
The strength
simplicity's
pro
sake.
is,
Just for simplicity's sake.
yeah. And also back squat itself, in my opinion, is such a great workout, great
Yeah.
exercise to see a absolute strength progression.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That's why.
awesome.
And you'll do. How long is this study going to be?
3 weeks. So we have 3 weeks on starting at July 7th, I believe, and then we have 3 weeks until 1st, and then we do the reassessment on the next.
You think that'll be long enough to see
It would
some?
be hard. Yeah, it would. I think I'm expecting a lot of progression from anybody here, except me, because my squat number hasn't gone up for a while. And if this works out, that tells me a lot of things. Because
What does it tell you?
so my back squat has stopped since like a year and a half, just by going through this 3 weeks of velocity based training, and having the higher 1 rep max would be that would tell it's an exceptional program. Whereas Jackson's been he's already done like 2 1 rep max just for the fun of it. He already had 20-pound improvement without going through a traditional strength programming. So I would expect him to just skyrocket in this 1 rep max.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Out of curiosity, how much is the equipment that we purchased, the velocity measurement system?
So we're using OVR velocity device, and that is
I think Emmett might bring it out here so we can show it.
that's $249 for just for
Sure,
this device.
Okay. So I'm just putting it in front of the screen. So it's got it.
So this is the device we'll be using. OVR performance, OVR velocity device.
Scoot
You
back
put
a
this
little
string.
bit so we can see it better.
Yeah. So you're putting this string, attach it to the end of the barbell. It gets so you can also get rid of eccentric velocity and just get the concentric velocity, because that's what we care of when we're doing back squat. We don't want that eccentric velocity to be on our concentric velocity, because that would ruin a lot of things. So we can just get the concentric velocity, compare it, and you can just download it on your phone. You can also see that threshold. You can set your threshold. The threshold is updated each rep, which is very useful for velocity-based training.
Cool. I think that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how those compare.
Mhm.
Any other notes on this one, Seung, that you wanted to tag in?
Do you guys have any questions on velocity-based training?
How are you going to feel when I start back squatting more than you saw?
He's gonna
That's
cry
impossible,
into his
Sam.
pillow at
Sam,
night.
if you really do that, oh my God. I don't know what I'm gonna say about it.
I'm sorry for you, bro. Like I don't. You're gonna have to start preparing for it now. I don't know what to say.
That would be suspicious.
It would be suspicious. I'm not gonna lie. If I started back squatting more than you.
All right, let's
Yeah,
move on. Jackson, take me through your upcoming study.
Yeah, so my study is a little less complex than Song's, but basically it's taking a look at kind of the most or the fastest rucking strategy. So we boiled it down to ruck running, which is like a continual run or trot for ruck. And then the other strategy would be like an interval-based run-walk method. So 2 minutes of running, 1 minute of walking. And we'd be doing this for the assessment. Assessments would be 6 miles long at a weight of 50 pounds and carrying like a 10-pound mallet or rubber ducky. So the purpose of it is to kind of figure out which method is the fastest. Like right off the bat, ruck running comes across as the quickest method. However, if we're able to, find that interval-based rucking with that built-in like rest period for the walk is actually just as fast or faster, it could be helpful to prescribe to soldiers because they're able to sustain that pace for longer over the course of a ruck, or they'll be less burned out than if they have to run ruck the whole thing. So that's the approach of the study.
Can you go over the course and how you're going to manage that component of it?
Yeah, so we're going to be running around a track, so 24 laps to get that 6 miles. And every lap, each individual will have a lap counter, so they'll be responsible for tracking their laps, tracking their mileage. And then each individual will be equipped with a wristwatch with the general time, and then also like a Strava or a phone stopwatch, just as a backup measure. And then when it comes to the interval, it's up to the individual to keep track for themselves. because soldiers in a training course may not have, access to an app that keeps track of the interval for them. So it's about looking down at your watch saying, okay, I've gone 2 minutes. All right, now I'm walking 2 minutes. Now I'm running 2 minutes. And that's the design of the study. There are a couple other strategies that are important to note. One strategy, or actually there's just one other one, which is running the downhills and running the flat ground, and then walking the uphills. The reason we're not testing that in the study is because every course is different, right? So you may have a course that has more uphill than downhill, more downhill than uphill. And this way we can kind of come up with a strategy that accounts for a diverse range of terrain the athlete may be testing on.
So we've got our initial and final assessment comparing these two methodologies. What does it look like in between? Are you guys going to be training this with, how are you going to be working that?
Yeah, so kind of how the study design is going to work. So the first 2 Tuesdays in July, or I guess for the cycle, would be July 7th and July 14th. Those 2 days will be rucking 6 miles at 50 pounds, but it won't be like a quote unquote assessment. So each individual will familiarize themselves with either the rucking, like the run ruck method, or the 2 minute on, 1 minute off interval. So that way, because Sam hasn't rucked before, so automatically his second ruck is going to be faster than his first ruck without even having to train. So the goal of those first 2 rucking sessions are just to familiarize the athlete with the movement as well as the techniques. And then July 1st and July 28th will be the actual assessments. So Seung and I on July 28th will be doing the interval-based strategy, and Sam and Emmett will be doing the ruck run strategy. And then on the 28th, we'll be flipping the strategies. So the goal or the idea behind this is to account for any like improvement in fitness between those two Tuesdays. And we're able to calculate like the average mean time as well.
So what's the footwear going to be? You guys going to be wearing boots, sneakers? How are you going to work that?
Sneakers, just because not everyone here has boots.
Got it.
Yeah.
And are you going to be doing this, 6 miles, you're probably looking at 60 to 75 minute completion time, maybe a little less, but it's hot as shit in Ogden. At least it was when I was down there last week. Are you guys going to be doing this in the morning to kind of avoid
Yeah,
that?
we'll be starting around 5, so showing up around 4:30, warming up, and then we'll actually kick off the ruck around 5. So that way we're done around 6:37, depending on how fast everyone moves.
Nothing like a 5 a.m. ruck run to start the day. Which do you expect to be superior?
I think ruck running, the continual trotting, will be faster. I mean, in my time rucking, I've been able to ruck run an entire thing without issues. Sometimes there's soreness after, but I mean, it's like comparing like a 5K or 10K. Like the guy who runs the whole time is probably going to run a little faster than the guy who runs and then stops to walk throughout.
Yeah.
So that would be my guess, but we'll see.
Do you think that would continue if you increase the distance to 10 or 12 miles?
If you increase, like at that point, well, all this comes down to like the individual's fitness, right? The individual may not be able to maintain that ruck run the whole time, but kind of the idea behind the study is to see which method is faster. So that's why we're having the individual do both and compare their times.
Yeah, I think one interesting component with this would be for whoever's doing the continuous ruck running to annotate. I don't know if you guys have the ability to just annotate if they have to walk just out of necessity.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of interesting to see, because that's obviously the big thing, right? Like if somebody can run for 6 miles with 50 pounds, they're going to be faster than a 2 to 1 kind of interval pacing. I guess the big question is, like, can you maintain that over 6 miles, which is definitely doable, but it usually takes
I
degree of training to get there.
imagine for Seung and just like anyone who can't run the 6 miles, it's a little bit more. I mean, it could be me too, not to throw you under the bus, Seung, but I know conditioning is trash. Um, but like
It's
for
getting better. It's getting
yeah, it
better.
is, it is for anyone who can't like couldn't keep up the 6 mile run. Like it's more of a question of like are structured intervals faster or are like running as fast as you can and taking the rest you need in an unstructured way. Is that faster?
Right.
So I guess that's something you'll
Hmm.
probably need to write up, Jackson, if
Yeah.
once we do it.
Will you be able to measure per?
That's not included in the study. No, it's
That might
just
be
the
kind of
overall time.
interesting. That might
Yeah.
be kind of interesting to see,
Definitely add that in if we
particularly,
can get that data.
yeah, as it relates to extending this to a longer distance, right? Do you see a gradual decline in per mile pace with constant rucking? Because that's the idea behind like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, whatever interval structured kind of component you're utilizing. Is like it allows you to be more consistent over time, whereas running over 6 miles or 8 miles or 10 miles, probably will see a gradual decline in that per mile pacing. So that might be kind of interesting to take a look at. That might be, I don't know how you
Yeah.
list
Well,
that.
I'll add another detail to the study that I'll provide.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Any questions on that one, guys? Comments? Cool.
Not for
Sam,
me.
hit me, Sam. What are you working on?
All right, so for the past while, I've been working on climbing programming, dissecting anything I can find on the internet, MTI's old programs, and then working on simplifying it all down, back engineering those programs and seeing what anyone would need to train for climbing, how people train that currently, and how we want to apply that to any of our new holy cow, climbing programs at MTI, and what we want to do for this July program because we're going to do a climbing program. So I kind of personally have been interested in climbing training for a while because I started back this December of last year, maybe a winter or two ago. I got a membership at a climbing gym, and I was like, holy cow, like this is awesome. I thought climbers were all just like smelly nerds, but they all like there's a big training culture in climbing. Like they're all doing weighted pull-ups, they're doing weighted hangs, they have this all sorts of devices and technologies to like track their training and then train different things. So I thought it was super excited to do this. For the different plans I looked at, one, there's so much stuff on YouTube. Like I said, climbers have a big sort of training culture. So like there's a ton of YouTubers and people who just document their training and talk about how to train. Watch all that in my free time just because I thought it was interesting. Watch a bunch of stuff about different climbing programs. And then I also went through MTI's old program. They have a bunch of studies and stuff about stuff they've done. And I went through a guy named, what was his name? Steve Betchel. He's a big climbing training guy. He wrote a whole book about non-linear sort of training and how to best do that. And then a couple other guys like Joe Kinder, I think, had some course. I dissected that, a couple other things. But the big things that you got it.
In your research, is there a clear delineation between climbing fitness and climbing skill progression? Or
You
they
have
combined?
You'd have to define climbing fitness, but yes, like the fitter you are at climbing, you're going to be better at climbing. But you have to define climbing fitness. I think that the bigger thing that sort of tracks better is just finger strength, because a lot of these climbers are smoking cigarettes and doing whatever. They're like not actually like that in shape, but like their fingers are strong as nails. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they're also super light, so like they don't have to hold as much weight, but still, like their finger strength is one of the biggest things. That's what they train. Big thing, every climbing program had finger strength, some type of hang, grip, something. Mobility was also an interesting one that has a lot of stuff in these climbing programs. I think some of them train mobility in some stupid ways. I think a lot of people do mobility wrong. I can talk about that later. But finger strength, mobility, pull up strength, and just general back pulling power. So like if you can not do a pull up, you can probably still be good at climbing technique, but you're going to get to a point where you're like, oh, you got to pull yourself over this rock to get to the next rock. And then sort of like plyometric power and strength. So like you could think of it as muscle ups in the gym. Like if you can like pull yourself, jump to the next rock, and then grab on with your ring strength, you're going to be a way better climber than someone can only just like slowly pull themselves up the rock. And then the final thing is obviously like endurance, forearm endurance, general aerobic capacity, finger endurance, back endurance. Just like for bouldering, not as important, still super important. But like having good forearm endurance and not getting pumped out when you're trying to climb around.
Got it.
So far.
So take us through your objectives and protocols.
Okay. So went through all the needs analysis and stuff. MTI already had a couple things that I really loved that I'm definitely implementing in our program for July. One thing was their testing of sort of just like a general climbing assessment, which was VSUM. So basically they did it on a moon board, but really you just need some sort of accurate description of what ratings different boulders are. You climb those boulders, you have 50 minutes, you have eight routes to track. You can do more than 8 routes, but you only keep the best 8 routes. You then take those routes and then take their V score or their rating and then just divide them by 8 and you have your V score. And so that's that. We're going to do that pretty much every single Monday of the month. We go in there, do that score. It's also a pretty good training tool because you're figuring out how to get the best score, how to climb the most efficiently so you can go on to do better routes. And then you actually have to practice the problems to get better at them. And I think that's really important with any sort of sport and skill. If you want to get better at a thing, you can't just do pull-ups and finger curls in the gym. You got to go do the thing you're trying to get better at. So I think that's huge. The second sort of training tools are sort of our finger training, how we're going to do finger training. For us, we could really do anything and we'd get better. I think if we just kept climbing, our finger strength would get way better. But I think we're going to split us up into a mini site. I'm not 100% sure yet. I want to do some more thinking and make sure I think about this properly. But I want us to do a split between max hang protocols of max weight per time. So you do like how much weight can you load up and hold on to a certain edge for like 10, 12 seconds. Once you have that max weight, then you can go in and train at like a lower percentage of that weight for like under 10 seconds. Super intense, but super short time efficient. And then just slowly add load onto that. Like as you are able to hang for longer, you get to the 10 seconds, then you add more load and you'll drop back down to like 5 seconds or something. And you just keep scaling that up. The other one is a very similar version of that protocol. You just drop the edge distance or the edge measurement. So like normally a lot of climbers will talk about like a 20 millimeter edge. I think we would probably start on 24 if we could, just to make it easier for us because we're like beginners. But then you just do that however long you can hang. Once you can hang up to 10 seconds or something on that, you drop down the edge of the measurement of the edge. Yeah. It's pretty simple. And then you just progress that over time. Very, very simple thing. Very time efficient. Super intense. Probably takes you like really only like 2 or 3 sets with like 3 or 4 reps, and then you're done. It's super intense on your fingers. Only do that like once a week. The rest of the week you're just climbing and doing other stuff. The other things we'll be training are just general forearm endurance. We're going to get that from the VSUM and stuff, but also just like MTI has a great program where they have, can't remember exactly what it's called, but you're on a campus board. So it's just like a bunch of wooden rungs with like holds, and you're just constantly moving on that, just like moving all the time for a certain amount of time, and you just increase the intervals over the macros, over the mesocycle of the month. And you just work on your forearm endurance, and it's just hard as crap. And the other thing I want to work on is latching. So that sort of more plyometric element of climbing where we'll be jumping up, grabbing onto a hold, and then just dropping back down, jumping up, grabbing onto a hold, dropping back down. And you're just training your shoulders, back, fingers to really be able to jump on and grab onto something and stick it. And then we'll just progressively increase the distance and the hold. I keep messing that up. What is it called? Hold distance? Hold measurement? Hold width?
Yeah.
So that's what we'll be training.
And so just based on the initial final assessment, we're looking at a hold at max load for a set duration. And
Yeah. You'll be
those
doing
are going to be our two metrics.
the measurement for the hang
metrics.
time is load no matter what. Say that again. The measurement we'll be using for hang time is load, regardless of the groups. But then because they're having an easier time holding on to that smaller edge, their load should go up for the research says. But we're just going to standardize that to max load for time.
And then the other component will be the VSUM.
Yeah, those are the two testing. Those are the two testing parameters. The other ones, you're just getting better at that, and that should help your both VSUM, like the campusing, the latching, the form endurance. It should just help with the other two tests. But I wanted to keep it simple with two pretty broad tests.
What are you expecting to see? I'm
expecting all of our numbers to jump up. I mean, already from our climbing here, we've all gotten way better at climbing. And a lot of us I've seen, I think obviously our technique could be better, but like we'll get to certain holds or certain routes and it's just a small hold and we're just like, yeah, I'm done. I just can't do that. And so I think once we have time just getting comfortable with the uncomfortability of holding onto a tiny ass ledge, I think our climbing VSUM and just ability is going to go way up. I think that's the most important thing.
How do you think, I guess this goes for the group. So these are 3 concurrent studies with the same 4 guys. Do you foresee any issues with the balance of that?
No, I don't, because they're all different things and we've kind of been just absolutely hammered this first month. So I feel like our baseline for what we can take is pretty high already. But the others, they might disagree on it.
So for me, the rock climbing and the velocity-based training, they don't really relate to each other at all. For rucking and velocity-based training, I think rucking can definitely be a problem when we try to approach it in a velocity-based training. Using the velocity we'll be doing Monday velocity-based training, Tuesday rucking, and then we do another velocity-based training. With the rucking, because we're not as conditioned with the ruck distance running, it definitely has some impact on velocity-based training. That's what I would expect.
Could you take me through the full week of how these things
are velocity-based training?
For all of them. What are you doing on each day?
Okay, so on Monday, we're doing velocity-based training for the first session, and then we're adding another, but we haven't really came up with.
Something simple, because the squatting is won't take that long. And then we'll just add some small little extra thing we'll train on top of that to fill out a full hour session for our weight training.
Yep.
And then after velocity-based training, we're doing rock climbing. That's it for Monday. Moving on to Tuesday, we have 2 rock sessions. Moving on to Wednesday,
just one ruck session. It's just 2 spots because it's so long.
Yeah, it is a longer session.
Gotcha. Okay.
On Wednesday, we're doing another velocity-based training and the rock climbing. Thursday, we're taking an off day. I think we are for the maintenance, right?
Something on Thursday.
Yeah, something on Thursday. And then Friday, we'll do the same thing, velocity-based training and the rock climbing.
I think it would be really interesting just to annotate this in your individual studies on some qualitative feedback on how you're feeling, right? Because, I mean, that's a lot of work. You guys have been doing a shitload of work already. So I think Sam's probably right. Probably kind of gotten to a point where you're somewhat accustomed to that level of volume in a day total. But I would imagine, especially with the ruck running, that's certainly the most high impact. I would imagine there will be some residual soreness and stuff like that. So it'd be interesting to see. We've got this data collection for all 3 studies. It'd be kind of interesting to see the qualitative component of it as well. See, just on a session by session basis, like I was fucking wrecked from ruck running, and my time velocity decreased post, just because we're not doing any of this stuff in isolation.
Jackson, do you want to say something before I gap about what I was going to say? I'm assuming you got thoughts on this.
I mean, all I was going to say really is for the the velocity-based training, I would imagine Wednesday's session will be the most impacted, but probably Monday and Friday should be good, or at least you shouldn't see that much of a difference. But yeah, the Wednesday session might be, especially those first 2 weeks while we're getting used to the movement.
Right. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Sam.
And I just wanted to explain about what I meant about like we're used to it by now because of the stuff we're doing. I feel like shit. The Tuesdays and Thursdays sessions are hard as heck. I feel good, especially on the weekends. Like I feel rested, come back ready. I'm always ready for the next session, but gosh, like I feel like I'm going to be good for next month because we won't be doing these pull-ups every day. I mean, I'm just so tired of pull-ups. But like, I don't think it can get much worse than this. Maybe I'll be crazy wrong. I'll write up in my annotation about how wrong I was. But like, I feel like we're going through it right now. I don't know how much worse it could get. Maybe the rucking will just crush us, but we'll see.
Yeah, just for some
So yeah.
for some context, can somebody run us through what you guys have been doing for the last couple weeks?
Seung, you got that.
Weekly breakdown.
I was gonna comment on like how like the expected readiness for this cycle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sam is saying that we're probably gonna be better off with this with next month's cycle training compared to what we're doing right now. So my thoughts would be I think we're gonna get worse for sure because the velocity based training is a legs one rep max based. We're trying to get the absolute strength of the back squat. It has a lot of load, especially what Jackson's doing. Red 6 has a lot of volume, and also it also hits the intensity at a higher percentage. With the rucking and velocity-based training, trying to get that 1 rep max increase and rock climbing, I think we'll be feeling really bad. Like, yeah, just our legs are gonna be so tired. I mean, rock climbing, like we can exclude that, but velocity-based training and ruck itself is a lot for your leg. And we're doing 3 sessions a week for the velocity-based training, which is gonna be a lot of impact onto our body. That's what I'm expecting.
Yeah, I would expect that too. I'd be kind of curious about the rucking impact on your climbing as well, just because if you haven't been doing it recently, you're going to experience some pretty serious hip stiffness banging away. And obviously that could be problematic with climbing. So it'd be kind of interesting to see. I think that's why the qualitative component of it will be really valuable to add in, just so we're getting an accurate look as opposed to pretending like we're doing these things in isolation. Seung, go. I don't know if you remember, but just give me kind of an overview of what your week has been looking like over the past few weeks. You guys have been doing 2 days, I think, just about every day.
Oh, our training currently right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so we do Monday through Friday. So on Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the morning, we're doing a density program for our bench press specifically, and also along with that, we do a broad jump. Sam is doing power cleans. Jackson's doing hinge lift, and me and Emmett are doing broad jumps to see which component can increase the broad jump the most. So those 2 training in the morning, and we do rock climbing on Monday, Wednesday, Friday afternoon, like around 12 to 1 p.m. We just go there for like an hour. We're doing rock climbing. Along with that, we're doing 8 hours of. So each hour we're doing percentage based one pull-up rep max pull-up reps. So I'm doing like 8 pull-ups every hour until the 8 hour is 8 sets. So that's just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Tuesday and Thursday we're doing beep test, beep progression, chest integrity stuff, which includes keg lift, sandbag sit-ups, sandbag just barbell good mornings, and along with the pull-up progression over the 8 hours. So we're doing that every day. The pull-up stuff every day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They have so Tuesday and Thursday we're focusing on like kind of an endurance part and chest integrity. So yeah, so we're trying to get improved upon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 components.
Yeah, it's a
And
lot.
Jackson are doing. I'm doing strict press. Jackson's doing push press. I just wanted to clarify that. Seung and
Oh yeah.
Emmett are benching.
I
Me and Jackson are doing overhead press essentially.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight that the reason there is a variation between the upper body lifts is the goal of the geek cycle is to determine kind of like the king of upper body lifts. So if you only had time to do one lift, whether that's bench press, military press, overhead press, which kind of lift would you? And as of now, my numbers have gone up the most with push press. Part of that is due to the fact that my strength training in the past has consisted of sets of 8 to 15 reps, so more of that like muscular endurance. However, so this was my first time doing progressions that are 4, 5 or less reps, and so my numbers have increased quite a bit more than the other guys. So when we finish the cycle and we're like kind of determining, all right, what is the king of upper body lifts, whether it's push press, military press, or bench press, we kind of have to weigh in. We have to consider my low training age
Sure.
when it comes to strength.
Sure. When's your current cycle in, and when do you start the next?
The current cycle ends the last Monday.
June 27th.
And yeah. So yeah, Mondays where we're testing, even though Sam, Seung, and I are all doing different lifts for the progression, we all end up testing our 1 rep max for the bench press, military press, and push press on Mondays, as well as that broad jump Seung was talking about. And we're comparing whether or not my hinge lifts will improve my broad jump, whether or not actually doing broad jumps, progression will improve broad jumps, which is what Seung and Emmett are doing, or whether or not power clean will have the biggest impact on broad jump, which is what Sam is doing. And then on the end of our Monday assessment, we'll also be doing max pull for the grease the groove.
Cool.
Rest.
Well, let's plan on doing this again next week, maybe on Friday. I'd be curious to get your initial impressions on how the reassessments went and just kind of some thoughts while they're fresh. I think that'd be pretty interesting to listen in on because you guys have been doing a lot of work.
I gotta say this. I think, Song, you're wrong about next month being worse. It's just gonna be the same for our shoulders and back, but for our legs. We're doing so many pull-ups every day, so much pressing, and then we're going rock climbing every day. I think it's just gonna be the exact same for our legs. Like, I don't think it's gonna be very different. I mean, it might be like worse because you're not gonna be able to walk. Like, you can sort of just walk around with jacked up shoulders and super tight shoulders, but I think it's gonna be the same. It's gonna suck.
You guys need
It's
to set up
it's
an
gonna
ice
suck.
bath. Get a little kitty tub filled full of ice and ice that shit down.
That would be nice.
Sore. Yeah. All right, guys. Any other questions or comments?
Not for me.
Sweet. Well, I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say next week. I think it'll be pretty interesting. This would be happy to be done with the current cycle. Move on to the next. All right, boys. Talk to you next time.
All right. See ya.
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you.